lost 4 of 5, including last night at home to Memphis. But Middleton says they can't get too high or low. It's a long season.
Stay with it. We have to bounce back. Got a game tomorrow. Hopefully we can win that, get back on the winning side. But we know going into the season, highs and valleys. We just have to stay the course. Keep putting in the work and trust that that work is going to pay off.
Again, it'll be the Bucks and Thunder tonight. Tip is at 7. Meanwhile, trade deadline coming up on Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Milwaukee expected to make some kind of move to help the roster before then. Turning to the Badgers, they dropped 4 spots to number 21. The latest AP Top 25 comes after they split a pair of road games over the last week, losing at Maryland but beating Northwestern. They practice today, going to host Indiana coming up tomorrow night. Tip is at 8.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, spring training nearly here for the Brewers. Their pitchers and catchers going to report next Wednesday down in Maryville. They'll hit the field for the first workout 2 days later. Full team due in 2 weeks from today. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
Check this. The president don't want to come watch us to the Super Bowl. Guess what? We'll go see him.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
I wanted to put some Packers Super Bowl-related audio in the intro. But I realized that's kind of what we have, right? I wish we had something more recent. Last couple years. It's been 15 years. So a little bit of a bummer today when I sat down to make the intro for the week. I was like, man, it's the most Packers Super Bowl coded audio I have, the best soundbite that I have. Really 15 years old already. It's Charles Wood's great soundbite, iconic. And especially with the crowd pop in the locker room afterwards, it doesn't get any better. I just wish it wasn't 15 years old. That's kind of a bummer. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. We are set up, and based on everything that I see and based on everything that I'm hearing, I think everything's working, which is excellent. We're at the Media Center here, Radio Row in New Orleans. A couple of awesome guests slated to join tonight. One of my favorite analysts, one of my favorite people, although I haven't met him in person yet, so maybe he'll ruin it. I don't think so, though. Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports, is going to join us at 4:30, and he's been on the show a couple times. The analysis has been so good. He reminds me a lot of Eric Eager in the way that he talks about football, and I absolutely love having him on. So we're going to have him here at the table in person. He also played college football. He played linebacker at Tulane. He's from St. Charles. So selfishly, if you will all indulge me, I might ask him a thing or two about New Orleans. What is it to experience New Orleans in its fullest? What do I have to do, or what do I have to try to do in the limited free time outside of Bill's show and outside of this show when I can get out and see the city, or what do I have to do? Because I want to get the experience when I'm down here. So selfishly, might have to talk a little bit about his experience with New Orleans and Tulane, growing up down here. So he's going to be on at 4:30. Sean Syed, Sumer Sports as well, awesome analyst, has been on with Bill. I don't think he's been on this show, but we'll have him at 5. And I think towards the end of the show, we'll have Peter Bukowski. And I say I think, this is classic Pete. I just bumped into him 15 minutes before the start of the show. And Pete, I say this so respectfully because I love the guy. He always is acting like he has a million places to be and like he has a million things to do. And maybe he does, like he could. I don't know. I don't have his itinerary. But I'm getting dinner with Pete right after the show. And to my knowledge, or to my estimation, he's not going on TV in the next 2 hours. He doesn't have to go to the stadium or anything like that. So I bumped into him before the show. I just assumed we'd have him on tonight because I'm hanging out with him after the show. And he said, "Do you need me tonight?" And I'm like, "Well, I kind of just assumed." He's like, well, what time? And I'm like, "I don't know, Pete. I figured you would just be floating." So it's always a process with Pete. But I believe towards the end of the show, Rick is commenting on the live stream. I believe towards the end of the show, we'll have Peter on. So looking forward to that. 3 awesome guests. And who knows, Mike Clemens, I think, is floating around. So maybe he'll pop in at some point tonight. If not tonight, than tomorrow. But we have a lot to discuss. A very busy weekend in sports, some NBA news, some NFL news that broke just at the start of Bill's show earlier today. So those are the two big stories of the day. I want to start there. So let's talk about the Luka Doncic trade. We haven't talked a lot about the NBA this year. We haven't talked a lot about the Bucks. And I understand if you're a big basketball fan, and I'm a big basketball fan, it's a little bit of a bummer, but the league just hasn't given us much to talk about unless we want to talk about, why interest is down and why ratings might be. That just doesn't interest me. Like, I don't want to sit here and talk about, well, they could move the 3-point line back, or they could make threes into 4. That doesn't interest me. I'd rather just talk about a more interesting sport. I don't want to spend time talking about why one sport isn't interesting. Let's talk about something else. The NBA really hasn't given us much this year. This is the biggest NBA trade. I don't know where it ranks all time, but certainly of the last couple of years, like, this is a legit trade. This is on par with when Kevin Durant's free agency culminated with the Warriors. This is like when, I don't know, I'm trying to think of trades around this level. It's been so rare because we don't really have huge trade deadline moves anymore. Players just ask to be traded when they want to be traded. And because of that, they never really reach free agency, because why would I wait for free agency? I'll just demand to be traded to the team I want to play for, and then I'll sign an extension right when I get there. So free agency has kind of died. The trade deadline has kind of died. This feels like this is a legit basketball trade, the likes of we used to get player movement like this, and we don't really anymore. And I don't think the gravity of the Doncic trade really sunk in with me until today. And it's continuing to sink in. I'm only starting to fully grasp it tonight. And I don't think it's my fault. Let me explain, okay? So this trade happened, I think, around 10 or 11 o'clock on Saturday night, right? On Saturday, we flew in around midday, and we got the rental cars, and we made our way to the house. And our house, God bless Bill, and I've tweeted some pictures at Wisco Grant, the house is on the beach. So on Saturday, when the sun is out, it's like, Bill, I love you. Mike, Kristen, I'm going to put in my AirPods. I'm going to listen to some Jimmy Buffett, and I'm going to go walk along the water. It was incredible. It was 3 degrees in Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. I'm going to go outside. So that was our Saturday. And then we were tired from traveling all day. So I retreated to my room at about 8 o'clock, and I watched Marquette and UConn. And I have actually some thoughts on both of those teams. Maybe we'll get into that tonight. Maybe not. But I watched that game, and I was getting ready for bed. And as I'm going to bed, like, I'm half asleep and I'm plugging, that moment where you decide, now I'm going to go to sleep, and you're reaching to plug your phone into the wall. As I'm reaching to plug my phone in, I see a notification, because I have tweet notifications turned on for Shams, that that Anthony Davis had been traded to the Mavericks. And I didn't read the rest of the tweet. I just saw the little bump notification. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. All right, we thought maybe Anthony Davis could be on the move. I guess that makes sense for Dallas. That's pretty cool. Anthony Davis, pair him with Luka and Kyrie. That's legit, okay? And then I went to bed. I didn't in a million years think that he was dealt for Luka. I woke up and I said, oh yeah, Anthony Davis got traded last night. That's right. And I'm reading that. Wait, he was traded for Luka? I thought they were requiring him to pair with Luka, not to replace Luka. So I spent this whole day trying to kind of mentally reset and grasp a trade that I never really grasped when I first saw it, because I didn't think in a million years the Mavericks would trade Luka. And throughout Sunday, I'm trying to process this trade, and I'm thinking, well, if the Mavericks don't think Luka is worth $350 million or whatever the supermax is, all right, then good for them. They don't think he's worth it. If they don't think he's in shape, they think he's too ball dominant, too difficult to build around. I'm like, all right, let it rip then. Like, move him, get something that you like better. Because how often do we talk about in sports? And I brought this up. How often do we have conversations where it's like, well, player X is good, but they're not worth, $200 million or whatever. Jaylen Brown's a great example. I think Jaylen Brown's a great player. Is he worth it? No, absolutely not. Jordan Love. People have thought this about Jordan Love, and we'll see. I think the book is still out on Jordan Love. A player like Tua. Oh, Tua's good, and he helps the Dolphins win, but he's not worth top market value. We have these conversations all the time about players that we believe should be overpaid, and I think it detracts from the sporting experience. When you watch a guy who isn't that good, but they're making money that would tell you they're amazing, all right, I think it kind of takes away from the sport. So part of me really loves when a team draws a line in the sand and they're like, hey, we like you, but we don't think you're worth what you are asking for. We don't think you're worth what the market would bear, so we're going to trade you. I do a little fist pump when teams do. Like, yeah, good for them. You know what I mean? I wish more teams would do that. I wish the Niners would go to Brock Purdy and say, hey, man, we like you. We want you to be our quarterback. You're not worth this, okay? So here's what we think you're worth. It's going to be a huge pay bump, a lot of guaranteed money, generational wealth. but you're not Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. I wish more teams would do that, right? And maybe teams try and it just doesn't work because the agents and the apparatus of players and their representation, they've just gotten so good at getting contracts. Okay, player empowerment. But I kind of like when teams push back a little bit. So part of me, when Dallas traded Luka, part of me wanted to celebrate a bit. Like, yeah, organizational empowerment. They're drawing a line in the sand, right? And as the compensation goes, right, they got Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a pick. And everyone says, oh, that's a terrible return. Well, part of me wants to be sympathetic to Dallas as well. And this is what I was thinking about on Sunday. They got a legit player back, right? So many of these trades, when a team trades away a star player, a franchise cornerstone, how often is it 4 firsts, 3 seconds, 2 pick swaps? And I get that that's ammunition to rebuild your team. But what does that do for us fans? You know what I mean? Like, you're telling me that I just lost a franchise star. What did we get? A first-round pick in 2029? Like, what? Why should fans celebrate that? That sucks. So part of me, again, wants to be sympathetic to Dallas because they got a legit star player. You know what I mean? First-round picks 3 years down the line, that's for a general manager's job security. That's not for fans, right? So I'm thinking about all these bullet points and I'm listening out loud because I'm trying to find reasons to support Dallas and what they did, right? To push back a little bit on the outrage online because the sports mob online is just insufferable, right? I talk about it. When a head coach decides to go for it and then they don't get it, and then everyone on Twitter is like, that was stupid. I wouldn't have done that. No chance I would have done that. It's like, okay, it's a little group thinky, right? Do you guys just like to agree with each other on the internet? Is that what this is about? So part of me wants to push back on the outrage a little bit, but the more I stew on it, the more that I read and the more that I listen, again, to takes and information about probably the biggest trade in the NBA in a long time, the first actual legit trade the last couple of years that's worth talking about, I think the outrage is warranted, right? Couple reasons why. And maybe you've been outraged from the first moment and I'm explaining to you what you already know. Okay. I'm thinking through all of the facets of this trade, right? The NBA is not the NFL in that unless you're the Lakers or one of the big market teams, although there are fewer of these teams than we think. I think it's the Lakers. You like to say, well, the Knicks, they get every. Well, do they know? The Knicks don't get big free agents. It's really just the Lakers. Unless you're the Lakers, you get a Giannis or a Luka or a Wemby like once in a lifetime. And if not a lifetime, once every 20 years, once every 30 years, you never get these guys, right? It's not like the NFL where you can just ditch Carson Wentz and, well, we're just going to win with Jalen Hurts. We're just going to build around Jalen Hurts instead. That's not how the NBA works. You can't go, well, we like plan A, but we can ditch plan A and plan B is going to work. And like, nah, that's not how the league works, man. You never get players like this. It's not as simple as, well, that guy's good, like the Packers with Rodgers. Well, Rodgers is good, and we've won a lot of games. We've been in the playoffs the last couple of years. But we also think plan B is pretty good, and we're going to find a way to win with plan B. In the NBA, man, there's no plan B. There's no plan C. It's about having a Luka or a Giannis or a Wemby, and you just don't get those guys but once in 2 or 3 decades, but once in a lifetime, right? So Dallas unloading this guy at age 25, they traded him away. You guys, he's 25. And I think conventional wisdom would tell us most players hit their athletic peak, their prime, at 27. Luka is 2 years away from when most players are actually even at their best. And they shipped him off for Anthony Davis, and I'm sympathetic because as a fan, if you're getting rid of a good player, I want to get a good player back. Don't tell me about draft picks in 6 or 7 years. That does nothing for me, right? But to trade away Luka, a player that you don't get to have, but maybe once every 20, 30 years at best, for a haul of resources that doesn't really tip the scales in your favor to getting the next guy, you know what I mean? That's tough. That's really, really, really tough. You know, if you're trading away a superstar, I either want to get a lot of young developing players, like, for example, when the Thunder traded away Paul George, they got a lot of picks and they got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, thinking, well, we just traded away a guy that you almost never get. Paul George at the time, very good superstar player. But we got back SGA, who we think could be a star. And we got all these picks that we think could turn into, how are we getting the next guy, right? If you're getting rid of the guy, part of the compensation needs to be about getting the next guy. And Anthony Davis is great, but it's pretty unprecedented and pretty wild, which is why the reaction has been so strong to get rid of a guy like Luka, who's at worst, probably the third, maybe the fourth best player in the league, for a package that I think actually serves fans better than most because Anthony Davis is a legit player. It's just wild. And I try to see all sides on this. I'm not someone who gets on the air and just, oh, this team's stupid, this team's stupid, this team's stupid, because everyone does that. Everyone agrees online. So I try to find the other angle. It's tough. It's tough to try to understand why the Mavericks would do this. You know what I mean? It's wild. If you want to comment, you can text your takes in today, 608-321-1670, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, the live stream as well. Vagabond John said, Luka also feels like a guy who's going to play until he's 40. His game translates, doesn't rely on athleticism like Ja. Here's the other thing, okay? We heard that Dallas is concerned with his conditioning. They don't really think that he's fully bought in. They don't really think, okay, even if that's true, and I think it is, and we saw it in the finals last year, he still took you to the finals, and he's still only 25. The fact that they traded him away the season, mid-season, after making the finals, when he's 25, without even an attempt at another playoff run, tells me that this is my point of view. This is my, I'm trying to read the tea leaves, is what the Mavericks front office is thinking. To me, the Mavs, I bet dollars to donuts this happened. They lost the finals last year, and a lot of folks pointed out that Luka looked a little slow. He looked a little pudgy. He wasn't as in shape and up to the physical task, quite like Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or Derek White or Drew Holiday. Like he's not on that level, right? And I bet that the Mavericks saw that experience and thought, okay, if Luka is ever going to get his butt in gear, right? If there's ever a time where he's going to put the pedal to the metal, it's going to be this year, because they just came up short in the finals, right? And it was so clearly he was a little physically limited. So the fact that he didn't respond at all, and apparently he was like 270, which again, when he's the third or fourth best player in the league, only matters to a degree, but it obviously matters to Dallas. We're trying to see this from their point of view, right? If he's not going to lock down and focus this year, then the Mavericks probably think it's never going to happen. And I get that. I see that. But also, like, this is a trade you make when he's 30. After you give him that contract, right? You get what you can for him down the line after a couple more cracks at the thing. You don't unload him when he's 25. Wild trade. And I'm glad the NBA gave us this. And we're not going to talk about this a ton on tonight's show, because we're going to talk football. It's the Super Bowl. We got a couple great football guests, and I want to talk a little bit about the Packers next. But this is an NBA trade unlike anything we've seen the last couple of years. We used to get stuff like this. I used to be able to follow the trade deadline on a Tuesday or a Wednesday afternoon. I used to skip class in college to watch NBA TV or ESPN to see what trades. Jimmy Butler could get traded today. Kawhi Leonard could get... These things used to happen. These things don't happen anymore. So I at least wanted to take a couple of minutes to begin the show to talk about it, because this is the type of thing we've been dying for in the NBA forever, for years, and we just haven't got. So I tip my cap to the NBA. Very happy that this trade went down, and I wanted to talk about it for a couple minutes. Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports, going to be here live at the table in just a couple minutes. He'll be here at 4:30. I want to talk about the news of the day, which is Myles Garrett requesting a trade. Very interesting, and I think related to the Packers as well. So we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Shout out and a big thank you to Flipside Pub and Grill in La Crosse. They're a big reason that we're here this week. They're home of the 2-for-1 happy hour on weeknights, 2-for-1 tap beers, house wines, rail mixers, that sort of thing. Also a delicious fish fry on Friday night that has a chicken option as well. So if you like the culture aspect of a fish fry, it's a Wisconsin thing, but maybe you're allergic to fish, or maybe you don't like fish. Well, they have an awesome chicken dinner as well. And I've actually gotten the half and half. You get half fish, half chicken. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, baby. That's really good. So they have nightly food specials as well. And on weekends, they open early. You can go in for breakfast, screwdrivers, Bloody Marys, and mimosas. They serve that all morning and all afternoon. So you don't even have to get there at the crack of dawn if you want to sleep in. Thank you so much to Flipside. In the past, they've sent us to spring training, and they've been on board with anything that we want to do at the show. So appreciative of them. It's the Wisco Sports Show live at Radio Row in New Orleans. This doesn't suck. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Welcome back to the Wisco Sports Show. We're live at Radio Row. We've got Sam Bruchhaus, Super Sports, coming up in just a couple of minutes. And he played football at Tulane. So he is born and raised in Louisiana. I think he's from St. Charles, and then went to school and played football in New Orleans. So I am selfishly going to ask him some questions about how to experience the city, where to go, what to do. We went out to dinner last night, and I won't bore you with all the little details, but I ate so much. I actually think maybe this is not a thing scientifically, or maybe I'm just on the cutting edge scientifically here. I honestly think I was food hungover this morning. Bill, when I brought this up to him, then reminded me I did drink a good amount. It didn't feel like I was drinking that much. I think I fooled myself. I think I thought I was just sipping, and I was going a little bit harder. So that's on me. But I did not feel great this morning, and I think a big part of it was the food. I think most of it was the food. I think I just ate so much. Went to Commander's Palace. I saw Pat tweeting in about that. A picture from there a couple of years ago. Turtle soup, pecan-crusted fish, strawberry shortcake, and then I also ate some of Mike's quail because he was full, and then I also ate the leftover Bananas Foster. So yeah, I ate a lot, and I think it might have just been enough to cause a food hangover. Scientifically, not sure if that's a thing. Or maybe I just discovered it, and maybe I'll get some sort of prize for that scientific discovery. I'm not really a scientist, but we'll see. Texts, calls, 608-321-1670. Cone Roller says, I don't see what the big deal is for the Mavs. They traded a guy with 0 rings for the former first overall pick with a ring. Luka is a stat sheet stuffer, Zion with a jumper. So I think Luka's great, but I don't disagree with your point, Cone, that we blasted Westbrook forever for kind of being difficult to build around. He's kind of a one-man show. And Luka's a great one-man show. And he can shoot in a way that, Westbrook never could. But I don't really love the player who operates all the time with the ball in their hand and everyone else just sits and waits for a pass. That's kind of what Luka is. Now, he's still only 25, and he's a much better shooter than Westbrook. Obviously, Westbrook is actually fitting in, playing pretty well in Denver, by the way. But I'm interested. Probably it's because Luka is young. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, if Luka has still failed to maybe win a title or to consistently go deep in the playoffs, maybe some of those criticisms will start to come. I bet they will. But Cone, I don't totally disagree with you, Cone. It's just the asset of a player like that. It's just so difficult to come by those in the NBA. So you better think long and hard about trading it away. And I assume the Mavs did. I assume they have their reasons. I'm trying to see some of their reasons because I like some organizational empowerment. I don't like the players running the roost the way that they have. I don't like them just getting extensions because they ask. I don't like them getting traded wherever they want just because they ask. An NFL story that we're certainly going to discuss with Sam Bruchhaus when he joins us in a couple minutes. Myles Garrett requested a trade this morning. He announced it with a statement. So again, I was right about statement culture. We were a little statement happy. College football recruits we just love putting out statements. Okay. Myles Garrett tweeted this morning, or his representation or his agent put out a statement, I would like to be traded. The goal was to not go from Cleveland to Canton. It was to win Super Bowls along the way. Something along those lines, right? Obviously, everyone's saying, well, this would be perfect for the Packers, I agree. I also think, and this is part of the problem, that it would be perfect for lots of teams. Why would the Commanders not be all in on this? Why would Detroit not be in on this? What about the Rams, right? And that's just the NFC. In fact, I was reading Deontay Lee at the Ringer earlier today, titled, Which NFL team should trade for Myles Garrett? And I'll scroll down. The Los Angeles Chargers. And then bullet point number 2, the entire NFC North. I agree, right? Like the reasons that this makes sense for the Packers, it also makes sense for a bunch of other teams, which can keep the price high, assuming that Cleveland's willing to trade him. He might force their hand one way or another. I don't know. Cleveland came out to say, we're not doing it, which is what you say when you're trying to keep your leverage and you're trying to get value. I get that. It's part of the game. Public image game, right? The buzz game that these teams and players have to play. I'm more interested as it relates to the Packers, what this does for a potential Max Crosby situation or what this does for Khalil Mack's free agency, right? If everyone wants to blow their wad on Myles Garrett, well, maybe it's a little easier to acquire another guy. Maybe that focuses everyone here, so the Packers can go there. I'm still just infatuated with the idea of a Max Crosby trade or Khalil Mack in free agency. The Packers giving up a couple first-round picks would be really difficult to see. And Myles Garrett is that good, true generational, all-time, one-of-one type of player. I mean, he was first overall pick in the draft with a bullet, and he's been dominant really ever since. And you just look at him, you're like, yeah, that's a guy who's going to play forever. So we'll continue to talk about this. Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports, going to join us next. Looking forward to connecting with him and talking a little bit about New Orleans as well to boot. We'll take a 3-minute break. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Welcome back to the Wisco Sports Show. Although I'm sitting in front of this badass, Bill got a new backdrop for the show, so it's not my name on the backdrop, but it's where we're doing the show this week. It's where Bill was 10 to 2. We'll be here all week in New Orleans Media Center for Radio Row. Joining me now, someone who knows a good deal about this area. Grew up here, played college football here, so I'm excited to talk football, and we've talked football with him on the show. Sam Bruchhaus, but you're also an expert to the area, so I kind of want to pick your brain on that as well. Sam Bruchhaus from Sumer, how are you doing, man?
It's been awesome. There's so much.
Oh, you can let go of that button, by the way. Can I hear you now?
Awesome. Yeah. You hear me?
What mic are you? Try one more time.
Hello.
Oh, there you go. Hell yeah.
Good deal.
I don't know what I pushed. Now it's working. Welcome, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Glad to be back. I've been here since Thursday because they were having a great event over at Tulane University where all the cap and contracts people from the league, agents and such came in. So I've just been enjoying being back. I lived here for many years. I went to Tulane. I grew up in Southwest Louisiana. We're in Southeast Louisiana right now. So enjoying the food, enjoying advising. I feel like the consigliere at this point of the city. Oh no, it's great. Don't get me wrong. Look, sports is my love and my life, but like if I could somehow become Anthony Bourdain on the side, I think I'd do it.
It'd be great. Matt was telling me earlier, but you have very good art knowledge as well. You a big art guy?
Particularly in this area, yeah. But music and art is also very big. It's a true Louisiana thing because you kind of just grow up with all that stuff being the same thing.
Sure.
So, for example, they have all kind of art around here from local artists for the Super Bowl. And then for the media days, it's all local artists. And it's just kind of like the same thing where, I guess in other cultures, it's like separated or something like that. But Yeah, so we were walking down Royal and talking about Michaelopoulos and Rodrigue and all these great New Orleans artists as well.
Well, this is cool. We did Cafe du Monde yesterday morning.
The best.
It's just coffee and donuts, man. I was surprised in an awesome way. I thought coffee would be like $10. Dude, it's so cheap.
Oh no.
It's just like a legit coffee stand where you get hot donuts too.
Exactly. And
it's awesome.
I mean, look, I recommend no matter how many people you go with, with just one order will be enough.
Yeah, I ate 3 of them. And
you ate a full order by yourself?
I ate a plate. Yeah,
that is very impressive.
And it carried me the rest of the day. I didn't eat until we went to Commander's Palace last night, and then I made up for my lack of eating the rest of the day. Turtle soup was excellent, and I'm going to try to enjoy some other local things. So you played here at you played at Tulane. What conference is Tulane?
We were in we're still in the American, but it's the American Athletic Conference.
Okay, so not the ACC, but the AAC.
Right.
Okay, and now you've gone into data science. You're with Sumer, so you've been doing hits all day. What's the topic? Has it been Myles Garrett today? Is up in the news?
There actually has not been a ton of Myles Garrett, which I think for particularly NFC North fans, it's like, how can we get this guy immediately? Especially given that they're pretty much all in a pretty good cap situation. The topic really that has come up over and over again, other than Luka Doncic, I will note, which is like bleeding into life in general.
That's what I started with. So
exactly. Is Jalen Hurts, man.
Really?
There's a lot of questions about Jalen Hurts. And I think the reason why is because every position group on both of these teams, the Eagles and the Chiefs, have someone that's strong, and the one place that is not is the quarterback position.
So you don't think it's a strong position?
I mean, they're the best team in the league with the best roster in the league, and they're average in terms of expected points added per play in the passing game. And they have 14, 15, I don't remember, plus the playoffs, how many wins, but they're in the Super Bowl. And it's just crazy to think that that's their weakness.
Well, okay. So I've just talked about their passing game as a whole. So their passing game is their one weakness, but they have an unbelievable O-line. They have 2 stud wide receivers, including A.J. Brown. I think when A.J. Brown is right, like he could claim that he's the best wide receiver in football, and I don't think it's ridiculous.
In our AI metrics, there's only a couple of complete guys, and typically you'll see people stand out and be elite at one thing, and it's enough. So Justin Jefferson, an absolutely elite route runner. They get him the ball deep. So there's not always that yards after the catch, but he's so good at getting the ball deep, and Darnold was good at hitting him this year. It's okay. Flip side for Jamar Chase. He's so good with the ball in his hands. It doesn't really matter. But A.J. Brown and Nico Collins are the 2 that it's like, okay, these guys can do everything. Like they can be the engine of an entire offense, despite their quarterback's not playing very well this year.
He's not playing well, but even like if you're trying to nitpick the Eagles and find a way to think like, well, this is how the Chiefs could win despite being weaker here. Like you could nitpick quarterback, but it's not like he's Jimmy G. You know what I mean? Like he's played well in big games. He was awesome in the Super Bowl. So you can at least spin a scenario and a possibility where even though he's their weakest player, he could still have an awesome game. Whereas like Jimmy G was probably never going to do that, or there's previous guys who've never done that. So I don't know. I'm trying to find a way because I kind of want the Chiefs to win. But I look at the Eagles, and I guess that's their best shot is like Jalen Hurts turns the ball over a couple of times or just doesn't make throws, right?
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the entirety of the pass rush plan for the Chiefs. The biggest highlight that I have is Chris Jones is kind of notorious for just kind of walking around like a shark, picking people out on the defensive line. But last week, they were lining him up on Deion Dawkins, which makes no sense on face value.
Yeah.
But I think the goal is that you have to kind of help your best defender. Thus, you can't help anywhere else. And I think I've argued about this with Sean Syed of Sumer Sports, Stats and Scheme podcast, awesome guy. Does the Philly Special Ringer podcast, so very closely watches Philly. And he is of the mind that Chris Jones is going to line up on Mekhi Becton, and he can elaborate on that. But I think he's just going to line up over Lane. Lane's already an island player, and they're going to send 2 and 3 guys at Mekhi Becton and force him to make decisions. And so I think that's really the matchup to watch. And if they're able to win across the offensive line, they're going to be able to heat Hurts up. And I do not believe in Hurts when he's heated up like that.
He just, the last couple of weeks coming back from the concussion, and I know they had a ton of passing yards and the offense hummed, but it's still, I mean, I watched it against the Commanders. It still didn't scream like Jalen Hurts is hot and he's playing unbelievable football. So I don't know. That's the Super Bowl angle. Back to Myles Garrett. Packers fans, we've kind of been in this big game hunting mindset. Because when the Packers won in the past, in the 90s, it was with Reggie White. And then in 2010, they had just brought in Charles Woodson as a free agent. And in 2014, should have made the Super Bowl. They just brought in Julius Peppers, right? Like you can go back through history. There's more than one way to do it. But in our history, in our fandom, so we're trying to figure, like, how could they swing a trade for this guy, that guy? The problem with Myles Garrett is the reason it makes sense for the Packers, it makes sense for so many other teams. Like, why would Washington, Detroit, all of these teams are going to want to do this? So I don't, it doesn't exactly make it easy for the Packers if they're interested. A team that's pretty conservative in opportunities like this anyways.
This is the first time that I can really remember where like an NBA style bidding war.
Sure.
And again, big if they don't end up figuring it out, which is very possible given it's so early, but it truly is going to be a bidding war. I mean, the Detroit Lions would love to have Myles Garrett. The Minnesota Vikings would love to have Myles Garrett. The Washington Commanders, who is my favorite team fit altogether, given where they are, given their ability to pay him, window, so forth and so on.
That's just the NFC. We're only talking about NFC
absolutely.
teams.
And I think, I mean, just to give you a sense of the level of player that's being traded, we have trade comparables in our team offerings. And it's like Khalil Mack, but Khalil Mack was not this level of set. I mean, according to our AI grades, has been 95th percentile or greater in the pass rush game every year.
Yeah.
And he's played for 7 or 8 years. He's been in the league for a while. And it's like clockwork. You can count on him being just an absolute demolition.
The Mike Evans of pass rushers, would that be a loose comparison where it's like you just know what you're getting all of the time? And he's better at being a pass rusher than Mike Evans is probably at being a wide receiver. But just the idea
that's really saying
something. It is. And I think he's that good. But just the idea that you can pencil. So if you're giving up multiple firsts or whatever it is for a guy, and what is he, 29, I think? It's about as good of a bet that you could make in a transaction like this, right?
Oh, almost certainly. And he really hasn't struggled with injury at any point either. He's extremely durable.
Knock on wood for him.
Right, exactly. But I can't remember the last time a player like this has been on the open market. I mean, quite literally, our scouts think he is the best talent in the league.
He could just be the best player in football.
Exactly.
He's got a claim to that.
And this year circumstances were weird, but there were games where he almost won the game all by himself from the defensive end position. And that's both eye test and looking at the metrics and looking at the production he was putting up. So every team should try to get him basically, even rearrange what you got to. But if this is a true, open bidding war, I don't see how this doesn't involve multiple first round picks. I'd be shocked if some fringe mid-level quarterbacks wouldn't be involved if that's what they're looking for. It may not be. They may just want to go quarterback. But this is both a unique opportunity, and it sucks for the Browns because this is a franchise pillar. But at the same time, this player is so valuable, they may be able to flip their whole team in 2 years.
Yeah. And we've seen other teams do that in the past.
Right.
So, and that's kind of why the NFL is fun. Like the NBA, you have to trade away a franchise pillar. It's like, this could be 15, 20 years. You just don't know because you're so beholden on that lottery ball and hitting the right pick. If you hit the lottery ball, the NFL, you do it right, you could be back in 2 years and in a better spot in 2 years because now financially you're growing. You're not necessarily constricted like you are at the end of a window. You played linebacker. Can we finish? Can I ask you about Edgerrin Cooper?
Oh, yeah. Man.
Okay.
I love it.
If you don't have anything to say about him, we can talk about something else.
Oh, no, I love it.
I would love to get your linebacker perspective on the season he just had, because at the beginning of the year, he wasn't playing a whole lot. I think he had learning to do. LaFleur, even through the end of the year, I don't want to say he was critical in press conferences, but he made it clear. It's like, he makes a lot of splash plays, but he needs to get a little bit more reliable with diagnosing and positioning and that kind of thing. But by the end of the year, you watch the Packers, I wasn't convinced that he wasn't their best player at times and he was a rookie. So give me your linebacker opinion and also your very informed, data-driven football opinion of him as well.
Right. So as a former linebacker, your goals on any given play change multiple times pre-snap and then are ambiguous post-snap. You have to figure it out for yourself. And it's really the only position where that is the case. I mean, cornerbacks and defensive backs are pass first players, coverage players first, and then you react to the run. And the big guys up front obviously have it pretty much laid out for them. It is either or, but you're playing gaps, and I'm really simplifying stuff.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong here, but at the linebacker position, you are totally expected to cover someone, and you are also totally expected to fit a gap. Safeties, again, like I'm grossly simplifying this, like from my experience, but Edge Cooper was a guy that, as analysts, we didn't necessarily agree upon in terms of positional value. We didn't know if he deserved to be a day one guy, early day two, linebacker position, difficult to evaluate. And he just immediately started popping on our AI grades, run defense and coverage. And like you said, as the year went on, it seemed everything clicked. And I was pretty much convinced that he was the best linebacker in the league by the end. And the AI metrics almost agreed with that.
Because eye test would tell you that.
Exactly.
And you're telling me the data backs it up.
The data backs it up. I think in a year where there were not great linebacker play, particularly because Fred Warner was hurt, and there was other injuries, and it was Zach Bond who was excellent in coverage, and that also popped on our AI metrics. We were able to trace that all the way back to the film and some of the great stuff he was doing. But Edge is just like a three-way player, run defense, pass rush even as well, and coverage. And when the scouts are saying, oh, yeah, we saw that in college, and now we're seeing it in the pros, and then the analytics are saying, I'm seeing this on the NFL field as compared to every other play we have in our database, that's when you know you have something. I could talk about him for like 20 minutes.
Well, next time we do this, we might have to. And I know you're on with Bill tomorrow, our midday show, so I'll have to make him a note. It's like, ask about Edgerrin Cooper, because I think the Packers – I don't want to say they flounder down the stretch. They just didn't really take off like we hoped. And they had a couple of games, the Vikings and the Eagles, where they had opportunities. It just didn't come through. I still think the season, by and large, there were plenty of positives, but Edgerrin Cooper at the end was like, I was like, Jesus, this guy might just be their best player. You know what I mean? It was really fun to watch because it's not something that we've had as Packers fans. Like, I don't know the last elite inside linebacker, because outside backers are just so often thought of as pass rushers, but his ability to do everything, like, I guess I don't have much to add other than I'm a big fan and I'm excited to watch him more. Put it that way.
There were weeks when we were all getting together and writing our columns and planning our columns, which you can find on sumersports.com, where it was like an Edge Cooper just love fest. And we were like, okay, who is going to write about him this week?
Yeah, someone has to.
Exactly. And especially for a team where coming into the season, the assumption, just given what we had seen, is that this defense was not going to be good.
Yeah.
And then, mid-year, it was like, okay, this defense is okay, but they're playing off a lot of turnovers. To add that into a already turnover happy team and add someone in the middle who is immensely consistent and pops all over the field in terms of analytics, in terms of what you're seeing, in terms of what the other teams are game planning for, it really changes the face of a defense. And that's why the linebacker position is the most football-y football position. And I have a piece on Sumer Sports about this, which has very little analytics. In fact, at the end, it's like, I believe I used a Tyrese quote of, don't let, numbers and stuff like that change what the heart is, because the heart is telling you something. Well, what the heart is telling you is when you get someone who's really good in the middle and a generational prospect, it changes the whole face of your defense because they can do both of those things good.
Yeah.
They can both cover the run and the pass, and that eliminates, practically the middle of the field any given snap.
It's very exciting. It was really fun to watch, and it's a player. They've had good corners, they've had good pass rushers, good D linemen, Kenny Clark, but it's a position the Packers haven't had, and I just don't know that there's that many elite guys, especially like you said when Fred Warner's injured, and it was a fun season to watch him. So thank you for that. Draft FM podcast, getting us ready for the draft, and that's on at Sumer. We can listen to that, right?
Right. That's on wherever podcasts are found. Also, we just launched a wait list for our Sumer Brain product. The idea is a lot of these things we're talking about, if you're wondering about these at work, just go in, pop it in, and it'll wrap it up in the manner of a ChatGPT or something like that. We're working on all kinds of great data that'll be behind that, be fueling that. It'll come out here shortly after the Super Bowl. So go sign up for the wait list, and we'd love to have some beta testers.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Enjoy your time in New Orleans.
Yep. Appreciate it. Same to you.
Thanks, man.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Welcome back. Big thanks to Sam Bruchhaus. He's going to be on with Bill tomorrow. So if you are a consumer of both, and I know many of you are, you can catch him tomorrow. I can't remember at what time, but you can always go back and find it in the podcast and the video stream as well. It's not hard. You can find it. Peter Bukowski is here. Peter, you just got in today. I see you running around making content. Very excited to see you. How you been?
I'm harried.
Harried?
Yeah. In a hurry.
In a hurry? How so?
No, I'm good. It's good to be here. New Orleans is one of my favorite cities. So I just love to be here for any reason. And then to be here for something like this is really, really fun. It's always like anytime you go to Vegas last year, it's a party. Anytime you come to New Orleans, it's a party. But then to add the Super Bowl, it's just like there's a whole other, I almost said whole nother level. It's a whole new level.
Another level
of fun. And I can't wait for the week. My My calorie counters are going to be upset with me, but I'm not even going to look at them. Who cares? What do I care?
I was fat last night, and we're getting dinner tonight. We'll see what I'm capable of. I haven't really eaten much today.
I can't. Last time we had a meal, you were capable of a lot, and I turned you on to Jim Martinis. Look at me.
You did. I had a couple too many.
I'm so proud of you.
I know. I was happy when you texted when I told you today, and you said you're proud. You're a man of culture. You help bring me along in these big city situations. What type of Packers questions are you looking to ask and get answered on Locked On Packers this week?
I think the big one for me is, and I asked it to Aaron Nagler, who's going to be on the show tomorrow, shameless plug, is, okay, the Eagles are here. How close are the Packers to being that team? How close are they to the Eagles? And if there is a gap, and I think there is, where is it? And how do they fix it? And I think it was funny because Brian Gutekunst was asked about this question. How do you close the gap between you and the Eagles?
Correct.
And he goes, well, the last time I was up here, it was how do we do it between us and the 49ers?
Well,
and at various points over his career, it's been these different teams. And so you're always chasing the best teams. So maybe Brian, get the hint at some point, maybe build the best roster. Well, would be the ideal part, right? But I think that the whole premise of we need to chase the Eagles, we need to figure this matchup out is flawed.
Sure.
But add talent if you can, certainly. I mean,
well, and I don't know that it's a matchup thing. Like, how do you beat the Eagles? It's how do you get a team that's as talented as the best talented team at any time in their conference? Because it has felt like they've always been second or third fiddle, and that's not matchup dependent. Like, I don't need them to build a roster to beat any other team. It just feels like they're a couple sandwiches short of a full picnic that we've seen with the Niners and with the Eagles. You know what I mean?
I'm not a big sandwich kind of picnic, just to be honest with you.
They're a couple elite players away. And with Philly, it's maddening because it's like they traded for
you think
Brown.
A couple?
Yeah, one or two at the least. Yeah.
I think they are a field tilter away. One.
Okay.
And I think it does matter where that guy is. Like a field tilter at tight end. I don't know if that's the perfect thing. Maybe Tucker Kraft evolves into that.
Sure.
But like if they could add a pass rusher who could be elite, even if he's not next year, or they could, I don't know, have a cornerback play at an all-pro level named Jair Alexander, who may or may not be on this team. I think that would be helpful. I think it's crazy. Like, what are the chances all of the guys that we saw play receiver for this team last year and all the promise that they had, what are the chances none of them would get better?
Pretty low. I think that's the most disappointing, disheartening part of this season. It's a real bummer. And then to get Watson hurt at the end, and now I'm unsure about Dobbs' noggin. Like, that was the most disappointing part of the year.
My understanding is that there have been some, like, Romeo Dobbs is not going to be on this team anymore. My understanding is that he would like to be back.
Are the Packers pretty bent out of shape about that whole situation? We got about 90 seconds.
I don't know. I don't know if they are still. I know that it was not the best thing when it happened, the suspension, which we reported on over at the Leap. Obviously, it takes a lot to suspend a player just for like conduct detrimental. So that kind of doesn't matter to me because I just don't think he tilts the field for them. I do think they need one offensive player to just go on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10.
Bucket getter.
Yeah, 100%.
I like that phrasing. It's like we have to pick up this 4th and 2nd. And like a team like the Lions, I don't know that they have a bucket getter. Their bucket getter was Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to drop the
option route from Amon-Ra St. Brown from the slot. Like he was always open doing that.
Angle route from the back.
Exactly right. And I don't know why Jaden Reed can't do that. Like I watched the Lions play and I go, why can't Jaden Reed do half the stuff that they have Amon-Ra St. Brown do? I don't know. This was not, I think Matt LaFleur is a really good coach. I don't think this was his best effort this year. And I expect him to come back next year, at least from a play calling standpoint and play design standpoint, much better than he was in 2024.
I thought he regressed. And I'm going to talk about that with Sean Syed.
Agree.
Because he's a big film guy, Sam tells me. So I'm excited. I thought he regressed a decision-making standpoint, but also schematically. Like, I just don't think it was his best year. Yep. And I can deal with a sophomore slump from Jordan Love. Matt LaFleur's a veteran coach, and he's been in lots of big games. That was disappointing and concerning. So we'll talk about that as well. We're getting dinner tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
I can't wait. I can't wait to introduce you to Cachon Butcher. It's a great spot. Le Pig Mac. It's a Big Mac, but if it were pork patties, I'll believe it's outrageous, unbelievable. It's so good.
You are ridiculous. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for the time, Peter.
Thanks, Grant.
We'll be back. We'll get an update. Sean Syed coming up next.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Bucks are going to be shorthanded tonight in Oklahoma City. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, Damian Lillard all going to sit out against the Thunder. Antetokounmpo and Middleton managing long-term injuries. Lillard dealing with some groin soreness. Milwaukee has hit a bit of a rough patch of late, losing 4 of 5, including last night against Memphis. But Lillard says it's not something they can let them get down as they close in on the All-Star break.
You got to just keep fighting through it. You know, you never know when it's going to end. You never know when the breakthrough is going to happen or what type of breakthrough it's going to be, but you'll never find out if you don't stay in it. I think that's where we are. You know, we've experienced some really good moments. We've experienced some struggle. I think we've had a couple of those stretches this year, and we've continued to fight, and that's why we come out of them and have good stretches. We just got to continue to build, and I think that's where we are right now.
Again, it's the Bucks and Thunder tonight in Oklahoma City. The trade deadline, meanwhile, coming up on Thursday at 2 p.m. Turning the Badgers, they dropped in the latest AP poll out earlier today. Wisconsin fell 4 spots from number 17 to number 21. It comes after splitting a pair of road games, losing at Maryland and beating Northwestern. They are back home tomorrow night to face Indiana. Wisconsin 7-0 against teams with losing records in Big Ten play, which the Hoosiers have, is at 8.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, 3 Badgers going to be heading to the NFL Combine later this month. Safety Hunter Roller, along with offensive lineman Jack Nelson and Joe Huber, have been invited to Indy. And Jacksonville has hired Packers quality control coach Anthony Perkins as their secondary coach. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, print.
Check this. The president don't want to come watch us to the Super Bowl. Guess what? We'll go see him.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Thanks to Peter Bukowski. He gives information-filled, wordy, thorough answers.
Mark of a true broadcaster and a true analyst. Hey, we got 6 minutes. Let's fit in as much as we can fit in. So I appreciate Pete Locked on Packers. I saw him recording with Nagler. That's a crossover event that I am excited to consume. Maybe on my drive back to the house tonight. I'll have to tap into that. If it's out, maybe it's publishing tomorrow. I don't know. Whenever it comes out, wherever I get my podcast, I'll probably have to listen to that one. So we appreciate Pete. I believe Sean Syed, Sumer Sports, is going to be joining us in the next couple of minutes. It's not really a problem, but one of the, let's call it, details or intricacies of where our table is this year is we got these big support beams next to us, which is fine, but they're blocking my view of like the main drag, let's call it, use a Midwest term. So if he is coming this way, I can't see him. So it might turn around very quickly. He might sit down at the table, but he's at Sumer with Sam. Appreciate Sam as well joining us in the first hour, and a big film guy. And I'm glad I asked Sam what Sean's bag is because, and I can't remember if I did this on air or off air. Maybe we did this off air, but Sean's a big film guy, huge film. Sam comes from more of a data scientist background. And obviously a player background as well, which is such a great combination. That's why I love Eric Eager to death, is the dude played tight end in college and then also is this brilliant data analyst. So I think having both of those experiences or the experience of playing football and also the knowledge and the wherewithal to process football data on that high of a level, right? Combining those two things. And as Sam talked about, like the data was backing up with Edgerrin Cooper, for example, what the eyes would show you on forget the film, just watching it on TV, right? And I think that's the mark of a true evaluation of a high level player like Edgerrin Cooper. When the eyes tell you, holy balls, that guy's awesome, and then you dig into the data and the data reflects that, like that's the mark of a player that we hope can be really, really special. So that was good. Sean, unlike Sam, unlike Peter, is someone who comes from a film background, right? So I'm excited to ask him about Matt LaFleur as the show goes along, and I'll take some of your texts as well. 608-321-1670. Lindsay Rhodes from Sumer Sports. She was on with Bill earlier, and I don't know if Bill told Lindsay this or not, but her comments about Jordan Love, I don't want to say they like stirred the masses. I think that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. Your criticisms of Jordan Love, I don't know that people loved it.
What did I criticize? What did I say?
Well, I went back and I listened to the clip because
Okay.
I cut it so Bill could post it. And it was his sack avoidance wasn't as good as most people give him credit for.
Okay.
His accuracy was poor. And I don't know. So when you say Peter Bukowski, when you say Jordan Love's accuracy wasn't great, is that like completion percentage over expected or?
Okay, hold on. Let me pull up the computer.
Yeah. How do you define or how do you choose to define a quarterback's accuracy? Because
So
that's where Jordan Love was
the
poor.
fun thing about that is that I'm not choosing anything
I like that.
with regards to our metrics. So the way that the Sumer Sports metrics that are specific to us are derived is so we've trained a computer model with hundreds of thousands of football plays, right?
Sure.
So it's learned patterns of just general football. And then it uses tracking data to evaluate the plays of each individual on the field at any given time.
Okay.
And the cool thing about what we have the capabilities to do is to go frame by frame on every single play. And to, like, you see the dots that get pushed around on social media, right?
Yep.
So this
Caused
is
quite a stir with Ben Solak and
exactly
Josh
did
Allen last week.
Perfect example.
Yep.
So we have the capability to take that play, for instance, and then to go frame by frame at this point, pause it, hover the cursor over Khalil Shakir, hover the cursor over Dalton Kincaid, and it will tell you what the completion probability is for both of those guys if the ball went there at that moment.
At that moment.
5 frames later, the completion probability changes. Also, you can switch it to expected yards. So at this moment, this is expected yards. And in Khalil Shakir's case, the completion probability when the ball came out was like 65%, and the expected yards were 5. They needed 5. It was 4th and 5. But Dalton Kincaid was 35% completion probability, but the expected yards were 10.
Yeah.
So I think that in and of itself just kind of creates a different set of problems, even just from a mathematical standpoint. Which one is the right answer?
Yeah.
Forgetting all of the other things going on the field. And by the way, from my perspective, it's not even a criticism of Josh at all. We understand the bullets are firing, bad analogy, but I think that this information or these numbers or these abilities to go look at these plays in this way are interesting in terms of putting it on the screen when you go watch tape on Monday or Tuesday, right? Just in terms of self-scouting and kind of figuring out, not in the case of Josh, but maybe a different quarterback could say, hey, on this play, you can show them the ability to see, like, if you got the ball out here, the timing was a little bit better, then you would maximize your ability to move the ball downfield. And when you see the numbers attached to it, then maybe that's easier for somebody to learn or kind of metabolize the coaching. So in that sense, they are tracking accuracy that way.
Sure.
And it's player agnostic. So they don't have any names in there. It's not like they like this guy better, because there are some obviously grading systems where you're looking at them and you can't help but go, oh, but it's Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah.
So maybe the wide receiver did it. So I'm going to, evaluate it this way.
In.
No, this is literally just putting a bunch of numbers over a long period of time. So that's where we got the accuracy. 33rd out of 46.
Well, it's not that difficult to see with your eyes too, right? There are these plays where, even if the Packers complete a long pass, might not be perfectly in the hands of a wide receiver that's running in stride. And I don't, you'd have to go back to his college evaluation, which is tough because he sat for 3 years. So it's not like all of that is fresh in our mind. He was never Mr. Accuracy, right? That was never going to be his profile.
By the way, this doesn't mean that he is inaccurate or that he won't be accurate, right? And I think what I said on the show too is that he's such a tough eval this past season because he's going in and out of the lineup. So your sample size is different. Sometimes you're like ramping up with people. You're developing chemistry. I mean, these are people that he's worked with for a long time, but there's a bunch of different just variables that could be in play for any given player. These numbers that I'm talking about are not in any way the be all end all. And some of them for different people tell stories that are fascinating. The goal is always to go to ask questions after and go, why is it that way? Let's go look at the tape. Let's go look at other people around him. Let's go evaluate the situation and look for the context. But the numbers are there primarily just to see are we missing things? Because I think a lot of times in historical NFL scouting, you get stuck on this player was good. They've been good for 5 years. I think that they're good. And so you start talking about them or evaluating their play as if they're still good.
Your priors are baked into your analysis.
100%. And so you
Human
miss
nature.
things, even in like detailed things like Sumer Sports works with a lot of teams, right? They're trying to figure out, should we give this guy the next contract? Should we give this guy a 5-year max deal?
Yeah.
Or like in the case of running backs, right? We talk about running backs, and that's probably a bad example in terms of pay at the moment. But
a little bit of a renaissance this year, though.
Yeah, let's have that conversation.
Yeah, I
too.
actually want to talk about that next. That's interesting.
So, but you could go, are they starting to, like, running backs fall off a cliff? When they get worse fast. And so are we seeing signs? How do you find signs? And that's what a lot of these advanced data and some of the tracking metrics I think are interesting. They don't tell a complete picture. I would never say this player is not good because, but they can tell you what to go look into further, and what questions you need to ask yourself. And sometimes people who have been very good in all of these different ways, and all of a sudden they start tailing off. Maybe their get off goes down and they drop in the ranks, like an edge rusher, and it drops off, or the run pursuit or something like that. They've always been in the 80th percentile and suddenly they're in the 40th percentile for this season. Maybe that's a sign that they're starting to get older and their body is not the same that it was. And so you can use that information in that way.
One more question on Jordan Love, and then running back sounds like it's very interesting. I want to get into that. When I watch Matthew Stafford, the more, as a Packers fan and someone who wants to see Jordan Love work, I gravitate towards Matthew Stafford as a comparison. Like, that's who I want him to kind of try to be. And I could be way off, but my dumb football brain is he's never perfect.
Yes, it's so true.
He's gonna have some misses and he's gonna have some picks. But when he's on and when he's hot, he can make throws that like almost no one can.
Right.
And I think that's true of Jordan Love to a degree. The problem is you need to minimize the bad throws and mistakes to a certain degree, and the amazing plays need to be there. But when I try to think of, okay, how could you win a Super Bowl possibly with Jordan Love? I look at the Rams and Matthew Stafford, because isn't that kind of, that would be my goal for him. Or if I was him, it's like, how could I perform and become that type of player?
Yeah, I think that's a good comp, probably. Ironically, Stafford also surprisingly in these metrics. Not surprisingly, because I think we all kind of saw it with our eyes. He had a little bit of a roller coaster of a year. Was he hurt for part of this? Is that part of the reason? I don't know. But he ranked 39th in decision making and 28th in accuracy. So there's also, maybe that tells a similar story, that maybe the roller coaster leads to numbers in these areas that move you down the charts, but maybe there's like something else in the evaluation that bumps you up, maybe explosives, maybe, for various players, it might be different things. There are definitely people who pop in one area and then don't pop in another. And if you look at the whole picture, you're like, yeah, because that's who he is as a player. And the area in which he pops more than makes up for the area in which he doesn't.
Right. And we have to weigh, and I think the Packers, LaFleur talked about this directly a couple times this year. He mentioned it in his end of season presser. He's like, when we created explosive plays, we were elite.
Yeah.
Right. Because they had this running game that was creative, and that could kind of be the meat and potatoes of the thing. It's just really difficult to march up and down the field, mistake-free, penalty-free, turnover-free, bad luck-free, 4 or 5 yards at a time. But if you can do that 4 or 5 or even more yards at a time and create a big play here and there, like, that's when they were at their best, and they just really struggled to do that in the biggest moments.
And so that kind of brings us to the draft a little bit, and why I keep thinking, even though I like the wide receiver room, how much I think like a more traditional wide receiver one type that is a target earner would really help this team.
What do you mean by target earner? I like that.
Somebody that when you look at the box score at the end of the game, they're always targeted at a high rate because they're just that caliber of player. You're creating an offense that is designed for him to be the first read all the time because he's just that talented. Somebody who you have to get the ball to. This is part of the whole game plan. And I just don't know if the Packers have a guy. I think they probably have guys who take turns being part of the game plan. And I think that there's some value to that also, right? Because then the defense is like, what are they going to do this week? How are they going to attack us? I don't know. But I think if you have like a Jamar Chase, I mean, I'm not suggesting you go draft a Jamar Chase, like those grow on trees, right? But I just think that a wide receiver more of that caliber than the kinds of wide receivers that you have that I think are very, very good, but a little bit more specific in terms of their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, well, and I really like this wide receiving group, and I think that was maybe the biggest disappointment of this season is none of those guys really took a big step.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the idea, do they need a wide receiver one? Do they not? I think you can get by without a true wide receiver one if the individual guys are capable of being number ones when the situation demands it.
Well, and at the end of 2 years ago, you saw that it worked. So there is evidence of like, are you sure they're the problem?
Yeah.
Because it worked at the end of the year and the offense is putting up tons of points. So was it them or was it something else?
I don't know.
I think that's a good point.
Well, and I think when Sean comes on, and we're going to get Sean Syed at some point too, like he's a big film guy. I want to ask about LaFleur's season because I thought he regressed in ways as a coach. I can deal with the sophomore slump from Jordan Love, but getting it from LaFleur 6 or 7 years in, and you've been to conference championship games, that was disappointing. So we'll talk about that more. Running backs really quickly, like it's fun. It's really fun that Josh Jacobs is a star and Saquon's a star and Derrick Henry's a star. So does that mean anything big picture? Do we need to change the way we think about the position or the sport?
I think, and I'm probably unpopularly, and I'm sad to hear I'm going to say something unpopular when I already said something unpopular.
If there were mad comments, I thought Jordan Love was poor this year. It doesn't bother me at all. There were just
and
mad
I'm
people on
not
Facebook.
saying that he's not good. There in no way am I saying that. Not at all. I think that I would say that I think that people are overreacting to the running back thing this year. And the reason why is I think that the running backs went to this year offenses that were much better than the offenses that they were on last year.
Sure.
And so I think that kind of in some ways even strengthens the argument that the running back success is reliant on the environment that they're in, and that we did not get any evidence that's new this year that a running back can be a total game changer for a team that isn't already good. Like you put Saquon behind the Eagles offensive line. Are you kidding me? That's not even remotely the environment that he was in New York. If Joe Shane had paid him $12 million, do you think that he would have suddenly done for the Giants what he did for the Eagles this year? No chance. I think that what we probably more likely would have seen were numbers that looked pretty similar to what Saquon Barkley put up last year with the Giants, in which case everybody would be like scratching their heads and going, why? And I don't know, is he just not as good anymore or what's going on? Because I think running backs require their environment to be good enough, in order to really break open these explosive plays that really draws our eye and then moves the charts from a numbers standpoint.
Well, and what's funny is last year when Aaron Jones was healthy, the Packers were unbelievable at running the ball. He missed time and they had AJ Dillon, who wasn't good enough. So I think part of the addition of Josh Jacobs is he's a star and he's great, but I thought that money, I viewed it as an investment. It's like, we can't have a guy who's in and out of the lineup. We need someone that we can depend on to be a bell cow. So it's more of like, we just need his presence or anyone's presence. And they couldn't rely on Aaron Jones for that last year. And when he was out, they just couldn't run the ball. So I don't know. It's certainly been fun this year. I don't know if it means that teams should go out and spend a boatload of money at running back, like you said, but it's been fun.
By the way, I don't have the number right in front of me, but you're just going to have to take my word for it. And
I will.
I really wish I had the number right in front of me. The Tyrone Tracy, all of the advanced numbers, and even people who just played fantasy. The Tyrone Tracy played well. So if you put his EPA numbers and some of these other numbers that break down like yards per attempt, and you compare them to what Saquon did in New York last year, you're not going to get a very different story. Does he have the ability to be Saquon Barkley? Frankly, I don't even know, but probably not. But did they experience a massive drop off when they moved to Tyrone Tracy this year? No. And how much less did he cost them? There's a separate argument to be like, well, it was $12 million for Saquon Barkley. And what did you spend that money on? And what did you get in return? And come on. I mean, there's lots of layers here.
That's the human element that makes it tough to sell, of course. Yeah.
But just in general, if you're talking about cap allocation and positional value, I don't think that this year moved the needle away from where we were already going with running backs. I think what we saw is running backs on good offenses look like elite running backs. I don't think that tells a story that if you are a team with an average offensive line, that you should go out and sign the next big free agent running back and expect that is going to be the answer to all your problems. Even if Saquon was on the Giants, how many wins do you think he adds to the Giants this year? How many games does he tilt?
Yeah.
Like maybe he tilts one because he gets a couple of really well-timed big runs or something like that, but it doesn't change the outcome for your franchise.
State of the team,
yes,
trajectory of the roster. And well, when I keep saying, well, it was fun, put it this way. It's a lot more fun to come to this conclusion about running backs to watch good backs on great teams rather than to watch great backs on bad teams 100%. And to be like, well, they don't matter. This is more fun. I'd rather have them on the great teams.
And thank God they sent him to the Eagles.
Yeah, right.
For all of us.
It's
I mean,
funny.
outside of, NFC West fans, maybe the Chiefs or anybody the Eagles have knocked off along the way. But like, this is what we want to see from Saquon.
Yeah.
This is it.
Especially when their careers are short. Like, I want them in a spot.
Yes.
And it sucks for Giants fans, but I think Giants fans are probably, well, and we could ask Matt, he is one. He to the point where like, yeah, he's great, but we got so many other problems. I can't even, but it's embarrassing and it sucks.
So you want to allocate the money elsewhere. I do understand though, in the larger scheme of things, it's $12 million.
Yeah. It's not
and you're like going top of the market for running back. I mean, not really, because you've got like Christian up there at the top, but like, this is what you're paying one of the best running backs, maybe the best running back in the league. Like, that's not that much money. So eat it. I understand what fans are saying. I'm just saying in terms of roster building, it's not the priority it's not where you start.
Sure.
It just shouldn't be, in my opinion.
It's more fun to prove it this way. It's very fun to watch. It was a fun season. Lindsay Rhodes, Sumer, I kept you a little too long. I'm sorry. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I'll be right back.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Sports Show. Welcome back. Appreciative of Lindsay Rhodes. I think there was a wire crossed. I thought we were getting Sean. We got Lindsay, same business, same really, really good football analysis. And also that's Radio Row, right? People are walking all over the place all the time. Sometimes you got to talk with someone you didn't think you were going to talk with. And I had her on my rundown for tomorrow, so it's not like I was unprepared. She was on with Bill earlier today and was excellent, talking about Jordan Love. I really like that running back conversation. And I try to be, look, I'm a bozo. I don't pretend that I'm not. But I try to understand, the modern school of thought, or, whatever's backed by analytics or whatever the metrics, because we're, even if you don't buy into the nerds impacting the game, right, you have to recognize as a football fan that we have more data available to us than ever before. We have so much. So to ignore that, and to just ignore that because we don't like the nerds, well, that's a little silly. Maybe you don't like a conclusion that's drawn from one set of data or another, but to ignore the data and what the data tells us, that's a little silly. The running back conversation, it would be easy to look at the performance of Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs this year as a running back is back. And look, on some level, if we're just talking about performances on Sundays and the games we're watching, they were totally back. Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry were all a little bit irrelevant to a degree because they were on bad teams. And we just weren't getting the amazing Derrick Henry performances. Josh Jacobs, the guy who won a rushing title a couple of years, we just weren't seeing that last year. So to say running backs were back this year, I think from a viewership perspective, just from the perspective of us sitting at home watching the games on our television, running back was back because we were watching these stars put up performances that we hadn't really seen from them the last couple of years. So on a very rudimentary, I'm a football fan, turning my television on to watch on Sunday, running back was back, right? And we were getting performances from these guys. What Lindsay was saying is, well, what we saw this year was just a continuation of conclusions that we've been drawing about running backs for years. And it's more about the O-line, and it's more about the scheme, and it's more about the team, right? And we could even include Christian McCaffrey in this mix, and you might be able to say, well, look at how much better he made the Niners. Look at how much better Josh Jacobs or Saquon or Derrick Henry made their teams. And Lindsay's point is, well, that's because those teams were already great. They already had the apparatus built, right? Like they already had look at it this way. This is a good analogy. If you watch Survivor, right, you're familiar with fire making, or if you just like making a bonfire, right, you're familiar with this. If you're making a fire, especially in the wild, like the best way to do it, I consider myself a pretty good maker of fire. If there's an outdoor function, I'll step up, be the guy. In order to best make a fire, right, it's the prep work. It's the 5 to 10 minutes where we're laying out, the tinder, the paper, and then the little sticks. Like it's having everything prepared and lined up. You're creating this apparatus. So when it comes time to just take a lighter, or, if you're really surviving, flint and steel, whatever, when it comes time to just light it, it just takes care of itself because we've laid all this groundwork. We've built this apparatus. And I think that's probably a good analogy for running backs. It's like you want to get the O-line built up. You want to get the passing game, which is probably much more important and indicative of success in 2025. You want to get that built up. You want to get the quarterback. You want to get the scheme. And then if you add a high-level running back into that mix, well, that's the spark that the whole kind of Tinder bundle, the whole apparatus was missing. And I don't even know if the apparatus is really good. I don't even know if the running back needs to be amazing. But when you get a true superstar like Saquon or Derrick Henry or Josh Jacobs, it's certainly a lot more fun and exciting. And as a consumer and as a watcher of the games, like, I'm not going to complain. This is a blast. What am I supposed to do? Sit on my couch at home and be like, well, this is cool, but they didn't really need to spend all that money on the back. They could have done this for cheaper. Man, these are superstar players at a position that's been marginalized a little bit over the years. It's a blast to watch them. It's just really fun to watch. It was a fun year for viewing. And my final point to Lindsay, and I think this is a good one. This is my rapier wit, my thinking on the fly coming into play. If we're trying to prove that running backs are an environment of or a product of their environment, if we're trying to prove that running backs are a product of their environment, I would rather prove that by putting a running back in an awesome environment and watching them succeed, rather than putting a good running back in a dumpy environment and watching them fail. You know what I mean? Like, both kind of prove the same thing, but I would rather have that thought process. I'd rather have that conclusion proven in the much more fun way. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of an analogy for this. I'm struggling. I'm praising my own wit one moment, and now I can't come up with an analogy. But you get what I mean, right? Like if we're wanting to prove that running backs are a product of their environment, I'd rather watch them in a kick-ass environment. I'd rather prove it that way than the other way. Saquon running his head into a wall in Philly, or Josh Jacobs running his head into a wall and being banged up and just kind of irrelevant out in Las Vegas. This was much more fun. It was very, very fun. 608-321-1670. If you have any thoughts, additions, I'll do my best to watch the text line this week, especially when we have stretches where we don't have any guests. Bobby in Menominee, backing up a little bit, says, never been to New Orleans, but I think I'm going to be sticking to fast food if I ever go there. Why is that, Bobby? That's such a weird... That's an odd conclusion. Please elaborate. AJ in Janesville. Garrett will somehow end up in Philly, and this time next year we'll be asking if the Chiefs' offensive line can slow down the Eagles' pass rush. Yeah, wouldn't that be a real son of a bitch? Probably will be. I just think you start going down the list of teams that could be interested in Myles Garrett, who very formally, with a written statement on Twitter, asked for a trade today. Like, you can think of half of the league. The entire NFC North, you could make a case that they should be interested. The Commanders, certainly. I think the Rams, I think that would be fun, although they're a rival to the Packers in the NFC at least. But Myles Garrett in LA, that would be wild. You know what I was going to say? I was going to say that would just be wildfire, but poor choice of words. I use the words anyways. Johnny Driffle says, where does Malik Willis fall in these numbers? I don't know. In terms of accuracy, the Malik Willis thing is fun. And this is why Tony in Texas has been real. I'll put him on blast. He can't call in to defend himself. So I'll be very fair to Tony here. This is why Tony's Malik Willis takes drive me nuts. As he calls in and he's like, I don't know. I think Malik Willis would have, he just likes flirting with Malik Willis and the idea of Malik Willis being the starter. And I keep telling him, it's like, Tony, if you want to plant your flag on Malik Willis is better than Jordan Love, and you want to base your calls on that, go full Vagabond John and just obsess over something and just hammer it every day with your call, Tony, more than happy to take those calls. But what I'm not going to let you do is flirt. I can't let you flirt with it. You know what I mean? And I think, Tony, you're obviously smart enough to know that even if that's the case, or even if Malik Willis has a case that maybe he's pretty good too, the contract just makes this a non-starter. But then again, we have a lot of conversations on sports radio that are non-starters. It's kind of how this works. It's fun. We have a show to do. We have 2 hours to talk. Sully in Menominee says, that was one of my favorite interviews in a long time. Well done. Yeah, she was really good. She was on with Bill earlier today. Would recommend that you go back and listen. AJ says, the nerd conversation put my son to sleep in the backseat, so I'm all in favor of the nerds. Might get a Sumer Sports subscription. Yeah, it's very good. And Sam Bruchhaus, dude, he's really good. He is just getting started. He's really, really good analyst. And I like someone with a player background. I don't need it. I don't need someone to have played the game to talk about the game, but to play linebacker at that level at Tulane, and then to also be able to embrace data. Again, it's very Eric Eagerish in that, like, he played tight end at Moorhead, got experience and has the background in what it's like being a player and being in the trenches with your brothers, and but then also being able to look at numbers and say, well, that has a lot of validity, because I think a lot of folks are one or the other. If you've never played the game, you shouldn't be able to talk about the game, or some people are, all nerds. I think we can meet in the middle somewhere. Some folks would claim that nerds are ruining the sport, although that's a fun talking point. I don't find it to be entirely true. You can comment on the live stream as well. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills. Tyler in Massachusetts. We need to hear Grant's take on the Brewers using facial recognition to get fans into AmFam quicker. I used facial recognition to pick up my credential yesterday, and it was a little weird, but God, if it wasn't fast. So I don't know what it means for our rights and our privacy, but if it means less standing in line, look, we already don't have any privacy. You know what I mean? Like, they already have so much data. It's like that was the whole thing with the vaccines. You can be anti-vax if you want, that's fine. But the idea, well, they're putting trackers in us. Guys, we carry a cell phone with us. We don't go 10 feet without it. What do you mean trackers? So whatever, I don't need any privacy anyways. What do I have to hide? You're going to see me reading Wikipedia. You know what I did the other night in bed? For 20 minutes, I read the entire Wikipedia on Lake Pontchartrain. So when we were driving in to New Orleans from our house yesterday, we're going over the bridge. I just had all sorts of facts. It's like, well, technically it's not a lake. It's a saltwater / freshwater estuary. Really played well in the car. I also, I joked on Twitter when we got into town that Lake Pontchartrain is the Winnebago of the South, but actually for as big as it is, the average depth is like 12 to 14 feet. So actually if we're comparing lakes, I know we were comparing Jordan Love and Matthew Stafford, very good comp, Lake Winnebago to Lake Pontchartrain. I think that's how you say it. Obviously, iconic body of water, big fan of body of water. Rich says, I can't hide thanks to Meta. Yeah, we have no privacy already. Whatever. Scan my face. If it gets me into places, I don't care. Oh, and also, Tyler and Mass, I know you're a big Sports Hub listener, and I do want to get Felger on this week because I love his show, and he's from Milwaukee, and they're here. I talked to Jim Murray today. Very nice man. Big Jim Murray, very friendly. Told him, I got a lot of car time. Your show gets me through. I appreciate it. He's very nice, very friendly fella. So I thought of you, Tyler, when I talked to him earlier. Let's take a couple-minute break. We'll continue. We're live at Radio Row in New Orleans. Thanks to Flipside Pub and Grill, always so generous, always keeping us in mind and always receptive when I say, hey, I want to do this with the show. I want to go to spring training or I want to be at the Super Bowl. They're always like, absolutely. And also some remote broadcasts at Flipside to our lacrosse crowd coming up this spring, March and April, kind of in that window. So I'm going to be there. I think I have more than one live show at Flipside on the calendar. So looking forward to that. And when we get closer, maybe when we get through the Super Bowl and, we get a little bit deeper into the month of February, I'll make sure to, trust me, I will hammer you over the head with those dates. So to lacrosse listeners, or if you're in Eau Claire, Madison, lacrosse is a great time. And also, maybe we talk about this next. A lot of comparisons to be made between lacrosse and New Orleans. Dare I say, we can get into that next. Yeah, the New Orleans of the North lacrosse. We're going to be at Flipside. Thanks to Flipside, 2-for-1 happy hour, nightly food specials, breakfast, and bloodies and mimosas and screwdrivers on the weekends as well. So just so thankful for everything they do for the show. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Welcome back. I hope you're having an excellent night. Your week's off to a good start. It's going to be a busy week. We'll be in New Orleans Friday night, all 5 days. Bill's show, my show, Mike Clemens alongside. Looking at the schedule, guests, we got some star power. I mean, we already had Bukowski today. I don't see how that's going to get any better, but you know what? I'll try. Thanks again to Flipside Pub and Grill. If you're watching on the live stream, you can see their logo right there. Big reason why we're able to broadcast here this week. Very appreciative. The 2-for-1 happy hour. 2-for-1 house wines, rail mixers, tap beer, perfect for meeting up with coworkers after work, or maybe meeting up with friends after work to get away from your coworkers. Either one, both work. Both are great options. Appreciative of Flipside, and I think of lacrosse a little bit because when we came into New Orleans on Saturday, one of my first thoughts was because it's a river town. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's on the ocean, it's on the coast, but the Mississippi River dumps in. So we got a very interesting view. I like a good view out of a plane window so I can really get the lay of the land. I'm a big fan. And it's funny because on the plane, we're taking off from Dallas, Fort Worth. And then the other end of the flight, we're coming into New Orleans. And all the women on the plane were reading their books. They were looking at their phones. They were doing whatever they're going to do. And every man with a window seat, like nose pressed up to the glass, like, what is it looking at? So that's Dallas. Like we're all, it's very much a guy thing. If you're into maps, if you're into, that type of thing, like all of the men were like, let me get a glance at this thing. Right. And same with New Orleans coming in. So the lake and the river, and then leaving the airport, driving to our house. You know what I thought of? My first impression of New Orleans. And this is before going to the French Quarter or, like Bourbon Street or anything like that. Just buzzing into and out of the city to go to our house, man, it reminded me a lot of lacrosse. Like New Orleans, much bigger, obviously. But when you come into lacrosse, you come across 2 blue bridges. There's 2 huge blue bridges right outside the building that I am. Looks very similar the way they ramp up and then they go over the river or go over the water, right? And someone might come into New Orleans just like I've heard people come into lacrosse, and their first reaction is, well, it's kind of dirty. It's kind of seedy, to which I say it's a city of industry. Grow up. You know what I mean? But you got the power plants and the shipping, the barges, the ports. I got a soft spot in my heart for river cities. There's some real parallels. New Orleans and lacrosse. That's one of my thoughts. I'll stop waxing poetic about lacrosse, but you know what? If it reminded me of Eau Claire, I'd talk about that too, right? So I'd like to think that we talk about all of our markets between Madison, lacrosse, Eau Claire, and I was even in Marinette last weekend. Beautiful drive. In the span of a week, by the way, I'm a body of water appreciator. Yeah, I like bodies of water. I have seen Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, Lake Butamore, Lake Winnebago, Butamore and Winnebago, to a lesser degree, but still, I mean, you're pretty high up the list of iconic bodies of water, at least in the Midwest. And then able to see the Mississippi River down here, Lake Pontchartrain, which I'm struggling to pronounce in a way that I haven't struggled to pronounce something recently. So that's kind of pissing me off, to be honest. But also our rental house is on the water. It's the Mississippi Sound or the Bay of Mississippi. It's the Atlantic Ocean. It's the Gulf of America. Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of Margaritaville is what I'm just going to end up calling it. As a body of water fan. Also, this place reminds me of La Crosse because every time I drive between La Crosse and La Crescent, all I can think about when you're out there on the, what is it called? Is it a dike, right? Like a raised, with water on both sides. The only thing I can think about when I'm driving through there is, oh my God, it would be so easy to hide a body somewhere in there. And New Orleans is like that times 100. It's just swamp as far as the eye can see. And in New Orleans, you have gators. So you throw a body out there, they're going to take care of that, I would imagine. I'm not a zookeeper. I'm not a biologist, but I'd like to think that a big hungry gator they'd suck down a human if they found one float right in the swamp. That seems common sense. I also saw, I'm pretty sure, a warthog dead on the side of the road. I don't know if someone ran into that with the car. I don't know what that was. Very interesting, though, getting the lay of the local land. To circle back, the two biggest sports stories of the day, like one, a continuation of Saturday, Luka Doncic being traded to the Lakers. Look, there's parts of it that I like. And I think there's parts of it that I like because, and I've talked about this, it drives me nuts when everyone on the internet is like, we're all mad about this thing and we're all going to yell about this thing. Or we see this in football a lot. When a coach decides to kick a field goal or a coach decides to go for it or a coach does something that doesn't work, right? A play call or a pass, punt, kick decision, something like that, and it doesn't work. And then everyone on the internet is like, I knew it. I never would have done that. What an idiot. And everyone's like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I'm right. We're so smart. Listen to us. And it's just like, God, it bothers me a little bit. Even when the masses are correct, I'm still annoyed by the masses. So when Luka Doncic is traded to the Lakers, everyone's like, this is so stupid. This is so dumb. My first reaction to that is to be like, okay, well, let's everybody calm down. Like, let's not mob up here. There's got to be a way that we can make sense of this, or there's got to be a way that we can understand this, right? And I'm trying. I really am. Part of me is like, well, I like that they traded for Anthony Davis and not draft picks because that more services the fans, right? It's like, what does a 2029, 2030, and 2031 draft pick do? What does that do for John Smith, who's a season ticket holder? It doesn't do anything for that person. The team's going to stink. Those draft picks are going to turn into players down the line that are then going to need 3 or 4 more years at least each to develop. Those picks are more about job security for a general manager, futzing around on, mock drafts and trade simulators. Like, I don't know, way too many NBA transactions are built up to be, well, how many can we get? 3 firsts, 2 seconds, a couple swaps. It's like that reads really nicely on a tweet, reads really nicely when you open a story at ESPN.com about a trade and you can just see an Excel sheet of all the assets coming back in return. When you think about it from a fan perspective, right? If I want to continue to watch my team or get tickets to go to games, or maybe I'm a season ticket holder, or I'm paying extra, I am paying for a cable package that's, additional to the minimum because I want to watch my team. I want the FanDuel Sports Network or the Bally Sports Network or Fox Sports Wisconsin or whatever the heck, right? If I'm invested into my team and I'm into my team in any regard, what is a draft pick in 2031? I'm supposed to do jumping jacks for that? I could be dead next year. You know what I mean? We could all be dead next year and I'm supposed to. So part of me appreciates that the Mavericks wanted to get a legit player. I think that's more fair to the fans. I think it's better for fans, even if it's not popular to say online, because we're more obsessed with a bounty of draft picks, even though the odds would tell us they're probably not going to turn into anything. I also am sympathetic, and I want to like the Mavs for trading away a player they don't think is worth it. You know what I mean? Way too often in sports, we get so pissy. It's like, well, Tua, he's good and he helps them win, but he's not worth $55 million or whatever. Trevor Lawrence, right? Well, Trevor, he's good. I'm not saying he sucks. I'm not saying he's a bust. He's not worth $250 million, right? We nitpick all these guys. Jaylen Brown, you're telling me that's a $300 player, $300 million player, 300. That'd be a steal. Like, no, those players aren't worth it. But the franchise gives it to them because they have the leverage of maybe going to the open market and getting it, and I just wish teams would draw a line in the sand more often. I wish the Niners, I'm interested to see how they handle the Brock Purdy situation. When it's like, Brock, we like you. We'd really like to keep you. We think you're a great quarterback. We think we can win a Super Bowl with you. You are not a $60 million quarterback. We will give you 40 something a year, 120 million guaranteed. Here is a contract right now. We'll put it, you can sign it. You will be financially set forever. Yeah, you're not going to be making Joe Burrow money, but guess what, buddy? You're not Joe Burrow. I like it when teams do stuff like that. That's good business. That's how business is done in the real world, right? You get what you're worth. That's, side note, it's kind of why as an adult, as I get older, I kind of become more of a fan of the arbitration process. Major League Baseball, I'm a fan. A team and a player settling on a performance-based number for the year. Incredible. Because I get sick of what the market says. I don't care about them. How good is the player? What are they worth? Right? Baseball finds that. So if the Mavericks don't think that Luka Doncic is worth $350 million, part of me, I want to get on board with that. Like, hell yeah. Don't spend the money. Yeah, if you don't think the problem is Luka's probably a top 3 player in the NBA, and he's not even in his prime yet. So the principles of trading away a player, acquiring a proven asset instead of prioritizing stupid draft picks 10 years into the future, right? I want to get on board with all of that. I would be able to be more on board with it if Luka was 30 and it was becoming clear that you know what I mean? He's 25. Now, unless the Mavericks had reason to believe he wasn't going to resign. Another weird part of this is they didn't tell a soul. They just called the Lakers. Maybe they really wanted Anthony Davis. Has anyone just thought about that? Maybe they just think Anthony Davis is the balls and they're like, that's who we want. I guess that's reasonable enough. If you're going to trade away a top 3, top 4 player and a top asset in the league at age 25, there's just certain parameters that trade has to hit. And even though I want to go against the grain, against the angry mob on the internet and try to wrap my mind around why the Mavericks would do something like this, I'm struggling because it's tough. It's a really tough sell. Why don't we wrap up the show in a couple minutes? We'll come back and talk about the Myles Garrett trade request. Be a fun way to wrap up the show. Last segment of the day live at Radio Row here in New Orleans. It's the Wisco Sports Show. We'll wrap things up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Last couple minutes of the Wisco Sports Show, wrapping things up. Appreciate all of our guests. Appreciate Flipside Pub and Grill in La Crosse sponsoring the show. Really being down for anything that we want to do, whether it's spring training or Radio Row. Just really appreciative of their support and excited to be back up there a couple times between March and April for live broadcasts. So I'll make sure that I'll hammer those dates over the head. So you're like, Grant, when is that? Oh, don't worry. Soon enough, I'm going to say it so often that I'm not going to let you forget. Greg G-Dub in Appleton is angry, as Appleton people tend to be. He said, well, Grant, Appleton is a river city. Look it up. Grant loves Appleton now. Confirmed. Look, this is part of the reason why I look sideways at you folks up in Appleton, G-Dub, is you always want to pipe up and be included. Appleton is fine. It's a fine city. Don't compare the Fox River and the Mississippi. Those could not be. I mean, that's just not. That's not. Don't do that. I mean, a real river. I'm talking about the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Columbia, the Ohio, the Snake. Right? I want barges going down this bastard. I'm not talking about people out walleye fishing in the evening in July. Again, all do. A text here. We can wrap up the show with this. 608-321-1670. Gordon Lacrosse says, what are your thoughts on Packers fans wanting to trade back for Devontae? I think it's a horrible idea because we could get someone younger with a longer career ahead of him without trading for someone who will be 33 this season. I don't know. I think Devontae's skill set lends itself to aging better than some. I don't think he relies on speed or size or athleticism. I think it's technique and footwork. Very, very, very polished. I'd like to think that ages well. But 33 is no spring chicken, to your point. It depends on who you ask. A lot of smart football people say that would work really well. I'm kind of in the middle. I am leery that the Packers can solve their wide receiver deficiency by simply taking someone in the draft. I'm skeptical of that because I don't know. I don't know that. Put it this way. I don't know that whatever they're lacking. I don't know if it's as simple as, well, go get yourself a star. Well, okay, is he going to be a star right away? Or are you going to draft the Lucas Van Ness of wide receivers? All right, to be more fair, the Rashawn Gary of wide receivers, where it's like, it's going to take a couple of years. How does that help them next year? Their window is wide open. Brian Gutekunst said it's time to start competing for championships. And if that's true, and he really feels that way, and I don't know why I'd say it if he didn't, because Jerry Jones, like, we're all in, and then he didn't do anything. And people still won't let it go, and they shouldn't, right? But if Brian Gutekunst really is all in and they have this deficiency at wide receiver, how is that fixed with a draft pick, at least in 2025? And maybe you think you can draft the most NFL ready guy and he can be a star. And I just think that's difficult. I think it's really difficult to do, right? Part of the reason that there is a need at wide receiver is because they're so young. And I think these guys are great, but inefficiencies and inconsistencies are going to happen with young guys. So how does another young guy? Well, we'll just get a way better young guy. Okay, I can see the shape of it a little bit, but it's difficult, right? If they feel they need to make an addition on offense, I think a Devontae Adams trade, right? Something along those lines. I know T. Higgins is the name that everyone talks about. That seems like such a pie in the sky thing idea, but yet somehow I'm fully convinced that Max Crosby is fully an option. So I don't know. I have to make sense of all these things and line them up in a way in my head that makes sense. Obviously, I'm not doing it, but part of that is fandom. I don't know if you've ever heard this. Fan is short for fanatic. I don't know if you've ever heard anyone point that out on sports radio. Tomorrow, a couple very smart cats from Sumer again. Thomas Dimitrov, former general manager of the Falcons. I tell you what, I was in the shower the other night. Some of my best work. I have like 3 A+ questions for Thomas. So I'm looking forward to that tomorrow. We'll be back Radio Row tomorrow at 10. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow.